my name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to my horror confessional, where every week I'll have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe that they have properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today in the confessional, we have Celso Hurtado. Celso was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. His first book, The Ghost Tracks, was praised by NPR and won an International Latino Book Award. He is also a member of the Horror Writers Association. The Devil's Promise is his second novel, and he is a returning guest. Celso, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited. Celso came on about a year ago, and we talked about the classic movie Don't Look Now. And we were at that time we talked about your first book, The Ghost Tracks. And during that time, I was just telling you how much I enjoyed it. I loved your character Erasmo Cruz, and then you're kind of talking about your next project, which was this book that I am now holding in my hands, The Devil's Promise, which is, and I love to see it, an Erasmo Cruz novel.
Hmm.
So, congratulations, first of all, on the release of your second book, your second in the, hoping perhaps series. We'll see. We'll find that out. But yeah, once again, congratulations.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I read the book. I was telling you before we started recording that so I was very lucky. You gave me a copy of this. So I have a physical copy of this. So thank you very much. And I am a very slow reader. So I started reading this about a month ago, but I read at night and I fall asleep very quickly because I wait too long. And so like I had started the book maybe 2 or 3 times, and each time was interesting, but I was like, I want to read this before you and I have a conversation because I enjoyed your work so much. So yesterday I started reading this and I couldn't put this book down. I was like, I'm just going to get to the halfway point. I feel like halfway point, you kind of get what's happening, you get the story, and you could, it's respectable, right? You could tell the author, yeah, I'm halfway through. But I got halfway through. I was like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, 3/4 of the way through. I was like, no, I'm just going to keep going. I got to see what's happening. And I just finished it. I finished around 2:30 this morning. And I was like, wow, like this is exactly what I was looking for in an Erasmo Cruz like book, and it's just so much fun. So I just wanted to congratulate you on another just a great book. I just enjoy your writing so much. So could you tell me a bit about, because I know we talked about it earlier, in the last couple times that we talked about the difficulty you were having with writing this book. So can we go into that a little bit? Why you thought that, or why you were having such difficulty writing this second novel?
Well, I mean, the truth is, I honestly, I have difficulty writing in general,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Like um, I feel some pressure to produce something, something enjoyable. And so as I'm reading through whatever I'm working on, invariably I feel like, oh man, this can be better. This isn't coming together the way I want. Um, you know, part of that is just kind of wanting it to be really good, but it's a hard endeavor, right? It's a tough thing to do. So when I was first kind of conceiving the story and reading through it, it just wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work. But, after showing it to my publisher, they had some suggestions, and, I stumbled across some solutions to some of my problems, and it ended up fine. It ended up fine. So I'm glad I didn't trash it, which I was actually thinking about doing, right?
Really? At what point were you
Early
thinking of
on.
trash
It,
early
it
on?
was
Okay.
early on. But it was I was able to come up with some solutions that I was really happy with. Like you'd be surprised at kind of what wasn't in the story originally that made it in the story, like completely altering the entire thing. So in hindsight, like I'm very happy with how it turned out now, which I know is very, very different from how I was originally feeling about it. But it's hard. In general, I'm going through the same thing right now with the current project I'm working on. I'm halfway in, you know, I'm unclear on how to proceed. So I mean, I often go through these things as I'm struggling with things, partly because I like lots of surprises and twists, and I like to keep the reader as engaged as possible. And those are not so easy to come by, right? Like
Mhm.
surprise after surprise after surprise, it's hard to keep that up. And so as I'm going looking through my current manuscript, I'm like, oh, there aren't enough surprises or there aren't enough twists. How am I going to fix this? And it's just, it's hard. So hopefully this book will end up like The Devil's Promise, where everything kind of falls into its place and stuff like that. But I guess time will tell.
Yeah. And so I was thinking that you're talking about the surprises. I mean, this is literally a page turner. Like, there's so many surprises, so many like at the end of a chapter, or even at the end of a page, you're like, you have to flip to see what was going to happen next, and that's why I kind of got sucked into it, because that I can feel exactly what you're saying, that those surprises around the corner and all that. Like, I never really, with a lot of books, you can kind of, and movies in general, like there's a formula, right?
Sure.
And once you figure it out, you're like, okay, so this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, that sort of thing. Never got that sense with first of all with the Ghost Tracks, and then also with Devil's Promise. So for those who don't know, so the Ghost Tracks was Celso's debut novel. It came out, was it 2021?
Right. Hmm.
2021. And it actually, what am I doing? So could you please tell us a bit about the Ghost Tracks, and then kind of lead into what the Devil's Promise is about?
Sure. So, the Ghost Tracks is about Erasmo Cruz, who's a 17-year-old here in San Antonio. And the short version is he becomes kind of an accidental paranormal investigator after an incident down at the Ghost Tracks here in San Antonio. He's been obsessed with the paranormal his whole life and knows a lot about it, and eventually decides he wants to kind of pursue being a paranormal investigator. And so he takes on three cases in the first book with his best friend Rat. And the main questions throughout the book are these cases truly, supernatural in nature? Are these people just psychopaths? What's going on? And there's also questions about his own story, if he's being honest, kind of really what happened in his own personal past, even down at the Ghost Tracks. And by the end, you kind of find out everything that's really going on. In this book, it's it's similar in the sense that he's conducting another paranormal investigation, but I would say it's different than you might expect after reading the first one. The characters are different. The story unfolds very differently. But in this one, a middle-aged man comes to him and says that years ago he is worried that he may have sold his soul to the devil, made a bargain with the devil, and now as a middle-aged man, the bill has come due, and he's looking for some help. And so the story kind of unfolds from there.
Yeah, and I mean, you got me hook, line, and sinker with the cult stuff, with the devil stuff. I I don't know how much I want to say about that, but yes, there was some great stuff in there. There was one line that I really found. I just had to take a picture of it. I was wondering, read it. So this is when so Erasmo finds himself in a sewer tunnel,
That's right. Mhm.
and so it's very dark in there. So he's trying to light his way. Finally, after what seemed like a long time, but was surely no more than a few minutes, his left foot touched down on damp concrete. He stepped off the ladder, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight app. Erasmo immediately realized it was going to be almost useless. The beam of light emanating from his hand was completely devoured by the darkness, like a pure soul struggling to exist in a mad, cruel world.
Hmm. That's
What a
funny.
line, man! What an amazing line. I read that and I had to read it over a couple times, because it kind of, he says like a pure soul, and I think that he's trying to connect himself to being that pure soul, but we find out, like you said, that we don't know whether or not we're always on the line of whether or not he's being truthful to himself,
Sure.
and whether he's ignoring huge things in his life that are happening to him. And I just thought it was so poignant, and really, really enjoyed that line. One of the things that I enjoy, I promise I'm not just going to be throwing compliments at you, but
Sure.
one of the things that I enjoy about an Erasmo Cruz novel is that he's a skeptic and a believer, Like he's always on a line because I find my like with all those ghost hunting movies and stuff like that, like it's I find it very hard to keep in. And I know it's a movie. I know Dracula isn't real. All that shit sort of stuff isn't real. But for me, particularly like ghosts and hauntings and supernatural stuff, I find it really difficult to not roll my eyes with. And I think you do a really great job with Erasmo because he's always like on the line, like, yeah, I understand that the supernatural does exist, but it's very rare when it
Yeah.
does happen. So the majority of the time, things that are happening aren't really supernatural, and that really allowed me to stay in the moment with him. Otherwise, I would just be like bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. So is that something that you were actively looking like to do, like kind of toe that line in between both worlds?
So that's a good question. So uh, it's kind of a complicated answer. So originally in the ghost tracks, because these books have gone through like lots of permutations from my original thought process to what actually happened. And I don't know how if we talked about this the first time, but originally in the ghost tracks, Erasmo was going to be much more of like, and this might seem kind of really weird now after reading these two books, but he was going to be more of a con artist
Okay.
where he was going to pretend to know a lot about the supernatural, where he was going to use, he did have the experience of the ghost tracks, and he was going to use that incident to be like, oh, I know all about this stuff. Give me money and I'll help you. Okay.
Mm,
And so he didn't really believe any of it. And so in the original permutation, as he was going through the book, he didn't really believe, so he was skeptical the entire time. Well, when the decision was made later on to kind of take that out, he was already skeptical throughout the entire book. I didn't really want to change that. So I left that in there, but this time he wasn't doing it out of like cruelty or wanting to make money. He was really trying to help these people, in the first book. And so because it was already there and I liked the flavor of it, like I liked the way it felt that he didn't just fall hook, line, and sinker to everything, that just became part of the character, right? And so in the second book, it's so funny that you picked up on that exact line where he says, I believe it, but I believe that it's rare. I decided to really solidify his belief system with that one line. I think that one line kind of says exactly how he thinks. And so it was a conscious decision to make it clear to the reader what his thought process is. But that really came from the first book, which was almost accidental, if that makes sense.
yeah. Okay. Something you said kind of popped something in my head, and I was like, wait, so like what Erasmo feels like to me is like he's like a Mexican Constantine, you know,
Yeah, sure,
or because John Constantine, because but like mixed with like Ghostface in the sense that not killer wise, but like in the sense of like bumbling and always like he's not like your the hero that everybody thinks of. He's not like this big tough strong dude who always knows exactly what to do. Like he's always fumbling his way into things and like falling and hitting his head and waking up, or like he's always messing up. Like, at one point
yes.
you feel bad for him, right? Because you just want something good to
Sure,
happen to him. Like just in his life is shit. He has no money, he has no family, which is a huge plot line in your story. um he's lost his his closest friend, to him, for reasons that we don't find out till late in the book, and it's very frustrating, but not in a bad way, like because you
sure,
want these two to be together and stuff like that.
sure,
So
sure.
um yeah, and he's like this 17-year-old kid. I mean, he's still seven. He was 17 in the first book, and it happens. This second book happens. Was it like 6 months later?
6 months later, yeah.
Yeah, 6 months later, after the second one, he's still 17, and he's at one point he talks about like he says something about like the kids in school or something like that, and that brought me back to like, holy shit, he's still only 17 years old. Like I remembered it from the beginning when it said 6 months later or whatever, but everything that's happened to him and the life that he's living, you think he's like 20, 30-year-old man,
Sure.
but he's this poor kid. So what was the decision for you to be like, we're gonna keep him still high school or keep him still the same age and not like move a couple years, or maybe he's in college now or something like that. Although we find
Sure,
out, he's can't afford college or whatever. But what
sure.
was the decision behind that?
So, given kind of the themes of this book, and like you said, the plot of the book as far as him not having a family, I wanted the book to kind of be like a kind of a nexus point for him. Like, what are you going to do from here? Like, and it felt more in line with him about to enter the real world versus him already being in it, if that makes sense. Like him being in high school and be like, wait a minute, what's after high school? Like you said, I don't really have a family. Now I don't have a friend. I don't have a plan. And, I think a lot of high schoolers feel that way. Like, what the hell am I going to do now? And I wanted him to be having those thoughts versus a few years from now, some of those decisions will have taken care of themselves. He'll have a job or whatever. So I really wanted him to be at this moment where it really could go anyway. And so that was kind of the thought process behind there. Um, and that age has something to do with what you had just said, which is, you know, one of the things I like, as the writer, I like to kind of amuse myself in these stories to keep it interesting and not inside jokes, but just things I find amusing. He is a bad investigator, right? He is not he's not particularly good at this, right? And it's clear in the ghost tracks, like this wasn't his plan. This is just something that he kind of like, I need money. These people need help. Maybe I can give this a try. And but part of it is, he's 17. He's naive. These people that he's dealing with are savvier than he is, but also, he's in his head so much that it's hard for him, I think, to step back and see the totality of what's going on around him. But also, I think it's kind of fun for the reader because the reader doesn't have all the pieces. They don't know everything that's going on, but they know enough to know that he's in trouble and that he is not fully understanding what's going on around him. And I think that kind of keeps it interesting because you might want to see, well, what shoe's going to drop next. It's going to throw him for a loop because he's continuously surprised at what's actually, you know, happening. So um, that's purposeful, and I just kind of like that idea of him stumbling around trying to figure these things out.
Yeah, you like torturing your character.
Well, it's true though. I had read a writing book one time, and I think it's an old famous saying, but it's true. They basically said that a writer should put their character up in a tree and throw rocks at him the entire time, and then at the end of the book, you let him down, right?
Yeah,
And it's kind of true because, in both these books, he's really put through the ringer, especially in this one. Like he's in a bad way throughout the book for whatever, his grandma, Brad, what we find out at the end of the book. I mean, the case is not going well. He thinks he's responsible for something really terrible that happens in the book. But I'm a big believer in putting your characters through the ringer because I think it shows who your characters are for good or bad. In this case, there's some bad, right? Um, and any resolution that comes about feels a little more earned because they've been put through the ringer so terribly.
yeah. One of the things that you talked about the book is that, or maybe I brought it up, but there's a cult aspect to
Mhm.
it, and we don't have
Yeah.
to get too much into it. But whenever I read about a cult, like I'm infatuated with cults. But like, what was your process like? Your research process like for researching cult for the book?
So honestly, the the main stepping off point for me was the plot. So I already kind of had the plot in mind. So my research was very focused. It wasn't kind of like, let me Google cults and because it's just going to be too much information, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, here's what the cult does in the book, right? Let me see how a cult might realistically do something like that. And so I would be hyper specific in what I was looking for, right?
Okay.
Some of it is just completely made up, no research at all, right? But I
Nice.
knew I knew what I wanted because these books are are basically dealing with this kind of idea of is it possible that this is really happening? right? And trying to make arguments for both ways that yes, this cult has the ability to make deals with the devil, or they are absolutely out of their minds, right? And so my research was kind of like, well, you know, what would this look like if something like this were to happen? But in all honesty, a lot of it just ended up being stuff I completely made up.
Okay. And I want to ask you about the research on demons and demonology, stuff like that, but maybe we can save that
Oh
for
God.
this. We can
Yeah,
save that for the
absolutely.
Sunday school
Sure.
sessions.
Sure. That did require a ton of research, yes.
Okay, cool. So for the listeners, if you don't know, the Sunday School Sessions is a Patreon exclusive show that I have once a week with my guests, and it drops every Sunday. So if that's something you'd be interested in, patreon.com/my confessional. So, all right, let's get well, first of all, so before we do that, can you please let everybody know how they can support you, where they can buy your books, where they can follow you, where they can get The Devil's Promise?
Sure. So the Devil's Promise is pretty much available anywhere online, just anywhere. Um, I mean, well, let me just plug Ghoulish Books. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you can buy Devil's Promise online at Ghoulish Books for sure, but really anywhere online, you can order it. If you're in San Antonio, I think all the local Barnes and Nobles are carrying it. And as far as social media goes, I'm the only Celso Hurtado out there, so I'm on all of them, so you can just find me there as well.
Yeah. And I also want to talk about the project that you said you're working on, but we could save that as well for unless we'll save that for the Sunday school sessions.
Sure, sure.
But I did want to say that so Celso has been on before, and we talked about Don't Look Now. So we kind of went into his background then. So if you want to know about Celso's background in horror and stuff like that, please take a listen to that episode. For now, we're just going to get started talking about the movie. So Celso's here to confess his horror sin of never having watched Final Destination from 2000. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And how did this particular movie pass you by?
Well, in all honesty, like it seemed like a teeny bopper type movie, which is not my favorite. So, teenagers getting killed is kind of lower on my kind of totem pole of what I normally watch. So it wasn't something I was generally interested in.
Yeah, so it was like mid 90s to like late 2010s, like these high school slashers, right?
Sure.
And I completely understand that because, like, well, I mean, how do you feel about Scream?
So, but see, that's so funny you say that because that's hitting on my sweet spot because I like some mystery in my stories. And there's a mystery there, like who is the actual kill? I will eat that up all day. So I love those movies because you're trying to figure out what's actually going on, which is right up my alley. Whereas in most slashers, it's Jason or it's Freddy. Like there's not too much to really ponder about what's actually
Mhm.
going on, and that's the difference for me.
Okay, that makes sense. So Final Destination was directed by James Wong. Also did Final Destination 3. He was he's like an executive producer on the X-Files. He also directed some of the episodes. He also did Dragon Ball Evolution, which came out in like 2008, which I've never seen. I'm not a big Dragon Ball guy. Are you a Dragon Ball guy?
I am not. I
Oh,
am not.
okay. All right. Good, because I wasn't going to know how to follow that up. If you started talking about Dragon Ball, I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And it was written by James Wong and Glenn Morgan, who were their writing duo, or they were at the time. Glenn Morgan also co-wrote Final Destination 3, and he was also a writer on the X-Files. And it was written also by Jeffrey Riddick. Now, the film began as a spec script written by Jeffrey Riddick for an episode of the X-Files in order for him to try to get a TV agent. For those who don't know, a spec script is a script that you write. Nobody's asked you to write this, and you're just submitting it to people to try to get an agent or get a movie made or something like that. That's a spec script. So a colleague at New Line Cinema persuaded Reddick to write it as a feature-length film. Later, Wong and Morgan, the X-File writings partners, became interested in the script and agreed to rewrite it and direct the film, making it Wong's directing debut. So that's how the movie kind of came about. and starring Devon Sawa as Alex Browning. Devon Sawa's like Idle Hands. He was in Casper. He was in the Chucky TV series. Apparently, there was a time when like Devon, or it still could be, that Devon Sawa was like a hunk. Like people were really
Hmm.
into him, because I see it like on my Instagram feed where like basically they're feeding for some Devon Sawa. I
Hmm.
didn't realize that, and so that's kind of news to me. But but sure, I'm glad that people like him. Devon Sawa to me just seems like a very mayonnaise, just
Sure.
like very, he's not very
Very
much.
bland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very bland.
Yeah.
But he did fine in this movie, but I probably couldn't pick him out of a lineup. For
Sure. I
me,
guess the biggest star was who? Ali Larter, is that her name?
Ali Larter as
Yeah.
Clear Rivers.
I remember
Uh,
her from Heroes. Was it Heroes she was in? Maybe. Can't
I never
remember.
saw the show, but
Hmm.
possibly, yeah. I know her from House on Haunted Hill.
Hmm.
She was in Legally Blonde. She was in Obsessed with, I believe that one was with Beyonce and Idris Elba. Then there's Kerr Smith as Carter Horton. He was in My Bloody Valentine and Dawson's Creek. We had Kristen Cloak as Mrs. Valerie Luton. She was in Black Christmas and Lady Bird. We had Daniel Roebuck as Agent Ween. Roger, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly. Roger Guenveur Smith as Agent Shrek. Chad Danella as Todd Wagner. We had Sean William Scott as Billy Hitchcock. So everybody knows Sean William Scott. He is, Stifler in American Pie. He's Country Mac, and It's Always Sunny. If you see that show, he was in Dude, Where's My Car? It's like a comedy legend at this point. I mean,
Sure.
he's a
Yeah.
funny dude. I like him. He's in Goon. If you've ever seen that movie. Then we had Tony Todd as William Bloodworth, fucking Candyman. Uh,
Oh,
Obviously,
yeah.
Night of the Living Dead. He was Darkseid in The Death of the Return of Superman, like an absolute screen horror legend. So, my question for you is, what did you know of this movie going in? Like, had you seen a trailer? Were you like,
Sure.
I'm fairly aware of what this is, or
Yeah.
did you go in
No.
blind?
No. I knew from the trailer that uh I think a plane exploded and then they cheated that they got off the plane or whatever, and that they were still gonna supposed to die or fade or something, right? But let me tell you how confused I was. The entire movie, I was waiting for that log scene where logs come off and kill
Oh
them.
no!
That's all. Like I think it all got jumbled in my head.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
trailer and
yeah,
the
yeah.
other trailer. I guess it's from a different Final Destination
Yeah,
movie.
it's part two.
And so that's what I thought I knew, and obviously I didn't even know that. So that's what I walked in with.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so you're referring to the logs on the end of the train. No, it's not a train.
It's like a truck or
Semi, like a
something.
truck. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it falls off into the traffic. Yeah, that's an amazing scene. That if you haven't seen that one either, we could do that one in the future as well.
What is
That's
that? Is
great.
that number? What number is
That's
that?
two. That's just two.
That's
So you'd
two.
only have to
Okay.
watch one more.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so then we got Amanda Detmer as Terry Cheney, Brendan Fair as George Wagner, and then Forbes Angus as Larry Murnau. So I said all their names first because I want to credit, but also I think it's important. I'm not sure if you picked up on this, but most characters in the film are named after filmmakers or stars from black and white horror films. So Terry Cheney is Lon Chaney, Todd Wagner after director George Wagner, Alex Browning after director Todd Browning, Larry Murnau, obviously F.W. Murnau, who directed Nosferatu, Agent Shrek after Max Shrek, who starred in Nosferatu. Blake Dwyer is named after Carl Theodore Dwyer, who directed Vampire from 1932, or Vampire, sorry. Howard Siegel after director Don Siegel, who directed Dirty Harry. Billy Hitchcock after Alfred Hitchcock, and Valerie Luton after horror film producer Val Luton. So all of them were connected.
Yeah, I absolutely did not pick up on that. And not only that, I'm not sure I could have even told you their names during the movie. They were all just kind of bleeding together for me. So,
100%. And that happens throughout my notes. So if I get a name wrong, I am sorry, but a
yeah.
lot of these characters were interchangeable and didn't leave a lasting impression. So, but yeah, so let's get started talking about the movie Final Destination. So, another dark and stormy night. There's rain pounding against the window, and we're seeing shots of like, so these are the credits. We're seeing shots of a passport to France. We see Death of a Salesman on the shelf. I've never read Death of a Salesman. Have you?
No, I have not.
Okay. It might have some connection. They might be being very clever right here, and I wouldn't know because I haven't read it either. But I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt that it was very clever. There's another book reference in here, The Tropic of Cancer. I think
Henry Miller,
yeah, that Clear's reading it, and I was like, maybe it has something to do with the movie, but I don't know because I haven't read it.
yeah. So yeah, sometimes that feels a bit lazy to me. They just throw fancy books out there and be like, "Look how smart we are, everybody."
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they are. I don't know.
Well, it's one thing to just have random books to make you smart, but if there's a connection to it, that'd be cool. But
Yeah.
I don't. I looked up Tropic of Cancer and I didn't really see any connection to it, so I don't know. But
Mhm.
then we get shots of death throughout the ages. Um, then we meet Alex Browning. He's getting ready for his trip to France. He's very nervous. He's superstitious, not wanting his parents to remove the tag from the luggage. But his mom rips the luggage tag off anyway. And this is supposed to be like a big thing. I wonder, are they saying that the mom set this in motion because she ripped the tag off? Is that what they're saying here?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, he obviously is superstitious. Maybe that's all that they're trying to tell us. But maybe it was just to set the tone of like bad luck. But yeah, that's a great question. I had not considered that before.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because if that's the case, this mom has just killed
Yeah, just
a
killed a
lot
bunch
of
of
people.
people. Yeah. Hmm. I'm gonna have to
But
think about this, Miguel. Okay,
all right.
I like that. I like that.
And then let me ask you a question about airplane rides for you. How are you with airplane with flying in a plane?
I'm pretty good.
Okay.
The only thing that kind of gives me pause is not the flying, like not the being up in the air. I don't think we're gonna crash or anything like that. I'm gonna say I'm like just a tiny bit claustrophobic, right? And
Yes.
so when there's a full plane, like in the back of my head, I wonder, sometimes how you hear news reports that they couldn't take off, and so they're stuck in the plane for like 4 hours or whatever.
Oh my God.
Like when
Yes.
when it's a full plane, I think in the back of my mind, oh my God, if they make some announcement, I'm gonna be here for 5 hours. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Like so that is the only thing. And as soon as we take off, it's okay. Because in my mind, I'm like, worst case scenario, we'll be there in a few hours. I can handle that. But the thought of being trapped in there, that confined with all those people, it messes me up a little bit. And I try not to think about it while everybody's boarding, but that's the worst part for me.
Yeah. Agreed. That I'm a bit claustrophobic as well, and that's terrifying, especially like if you're in the back of the plane
Hmm.
and you're like at the window seat or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm literally the last person to get off this plane. It's kind of terrifying. Um, do do you like take anything to help you sleep on a plane ride, or are you just like fully active, like reading or trying to not think about it?
No, so I've tried to read on planes, but I'm weird, man. Like I need complete silence to read. I need
Mhm.
complete silence to write. I wish my brain didn't work that way because I know other people can like write with the music on and TV, and I can't do it. And so I get too distracted by the conversations happening or a baby crying or whatever. So I resorted now to just playing video games on planes, and that seems to help the time go by like really quickly. I'll take my Switch or something and just play on the plane.
Okay, the baby crying on a plane reminded me. So there's a baby crying on this
Yeah.
plane as well. Then it reminded me of the baby crying in your book. And you, sir, you have a fucked up scene, and I won't get into it.
Yeah.
I'm telling everybody they should read The Devil's Promise
Yeah.
specifically for that scene. I think that scene will forever haunt my days for the rest of my life. So congratulations on that.
Hey man, I appreciate that. What what's funny about that is like, I had that scene and I'm like, and then he walks in. I didn't really know what was in there for a long time. And it took me a long time to kind of come to that, but I'm really happy with the way it ended up.
Yeah. I wish I could say it, but
Yeah.
yeah, we all need to read the book. I'm telling you. So, all right. So find out this is his senior trip. His dad says that you've got your whole life ahead of you. And when his dad says this, Alex reacts weirdly. And I'm thinking, why are you acting weirdly to that? But perhaps it's already started. This kind of premonition is
Sure.
starting the day before, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the heavy-handed foreshadowing. So
all throughout it. Yeah.
yeah.
So while he's sleeping, things are starting to happen in his room with the wind. But I believe this wind is actually a representation of death because it comes back throughout the movie. And this is a slasher, but in the weirdest kind of way. So you kind of, compared it to a slasher earlier, and I wanted to say, yeah, so it's a slasher, but in the weirdest way possible because there's no physical representation or embodiment of the slasher. It's just death. And I guess wind is a physical thing. I'm not a scientist. I don't know if that counts as not, but you know what I'm saying is like there's no human or monster or animal sort of thing.
So do you think that means though, like, so death is like looking over its prey it's about to have the next day? Like, why is the wind already there? You know what I mean? Like, why is it just be like, oh, I can't wait to get you tomorrow kind of thing? Or
Yeah,
maybe
just
that's
like
just strictly for the audience's reason. I mean, purpose. I don't know.
yeah, there's no reason for death to already be there other than like maybe it needs more power. It was like Freddy Krueger where he needs the people to be more scared or something like that.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
But then we see that so there's a bunch of air happening, but then we see that the fan is off. So obviously it's not the fan. And then we see his clock. It's exactly 1 a.m. And there's a cool switch on the clock from 1 a.m. to flight 180. That was a cool little transition. I mentioned it because that shot of Alex's bedside clock when it fades from 1 a.m. to flight 180 took 5 days to get correct. So
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. Obviously, they probably weren't shooting 8 hours a day, but it took them 5 days to get that correct. It was a cool little transition. So then we kind of start meeting the rest of we're at the airport. We meet Billy for the first time. He says, "Carter, you dick," which is like his tagline throughout the movie, because Carter bumps into Billy on purpose. And then we meet the rest of the teenagers going to Paris, including Clear, who has her nose deep into Tropic of Cancer, like I was saying. And then this Harry Krishna bumps into Alex and tries to hand him something and says, "Death is not the end." And for people who have seen, you haven't seen any of the other movies, right, Celso?
No, I have not.
Okay, so there's five of them, and or maybe there might be six of them, and I believe there might be another one coming out soon or whatever. But I think the fifth one is the last one I saw. And I won't get into too much detail, but there's something here that reminds me, like it's kind of foreshadowing for that next movie, for that
Mm.
fifth movie, I should say. And I just like caught it. I was like, oh shit. Because I've only seen the first and second one. And then I saw the rest of these when my nephew was here like last year. And so we got to see them back to back to back to back. And they get bad. They get pretty bad. Some of them are
Wow.
okay. It's like peaks and valleys and all that, but some of them are pretty bad. At one point, they go to a NASCAR event, and like so, this movie, I was reading up that the death scene that we're about to see with the explosion and all that was the shortest one in the franchise. In the franchise, each
Hmm.
one after that was longer and longer and longer. Some going up to like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of just like
Hmm.
this cataclysmic event happening. And some of them are pretty bad, but anyway, so the Harry Krishna goes up to say death is not the end. And then Mrs. Luton says it will be for you if you bother my students again. So then we meet the French teacher, Mr. Murnau. He's really trying to get them to learn French, and they don't give a fuck. The airport has this old time board with that like switches. Were you ever in an airport with those? I feel like those went out of style a lot longer than 2000.
No, I never. I mean, I didn't fly till I was like had my first real job, so I was old by the time I flew. So I never saw any of that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it starts messing up, and Alex doesn't like that again, possibly the premonition. So then the airline employee puts a tag on his luggage and it says final destination on it. And there's this thing that me and my brother would, when we're watching movies, we'd be like, when they say the name of the movie, we're like, oh hell yeah, we'll clap or whatever. Obviously, if we're not in the theater, but like I've never seen it, the actual name of the movie in the
In
movie
print.
in
That's
print,
funny. Yeah, that's neat. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, cool, that's cool, I like that.
Yeah.
So then she says that his departure time is the same as his birthday, 9:25, and he thinks this is weird. And then the board says terminal, and he notices that. So I don't know if there's if there. if it's all just a bunch of little signs or if it's one thing that causes it. I think they're just kind of dropping in little things here. And I feel like at one point it's like kind of confused at what you're trying to tell me.
Sure. Like now that you're saying all this, like, do you think that, how you talked about the mom and he's obviously superstitious? Maybe this is just them showing us, look how superstitious he is. He's seen signs in
Okay.
every little thing around him, in the board and what she says and whatever. I guess maybe that's what they were going for.
Okay. So I wonder if he was, I guess he's always kind of been a superstitious person, and this is him. Yeah. Okay. I can get that. I can get that.
Mhm.
So then he walks up to the window to look out at the airplane, and then we're seeing a reflection back of him. And I'm pretty sure this is CGI. And it looked bad. I'm like, I was trying to think, you couldn't get this shot to work in person?
In real life. Yeah.
And maybe not. Maybe it was really hard because but it was night. You would feel like a reflection, but
Hey,
whatever.
hey, man, that clock thing took like 8 days, so
Yeah, that's true.
you know,
They spent that budget,
yeah,
the reflection budget on the clock. Okay, that makes
yeah.
sense. So Todd, his friend Todd, goes up to him and says, "Hey, let's go take a shit," which made me absolute fucking laugh so hard because this is like true friend shit right here. Like
Yeah.
when your friend just goes up to you and says, "Let's go take a shit."
And he spells
Um,
out the reasoning why, like his whole rationale. It's pretty funny.
do you
Yeah.
remember? Do you remember what the rationale was?
So he won't have to go on the plane, right? I think.
So he won't have
Oh,
to go
and
on the
so that the
plane.
girl won't follow afterwards and mess
Exactly.
up his whole, yeah, his whole
Yeah,
chances and
he's
all
like,
that.
you
Yeah.
don't want to be in the bathroom with a torque a wicked cable, and then you walk out, and the girls are walking behind you, and they get this watery sting in their eyes.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, that's hilarious. But the next scene was them actually taking a shit, which was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanna give you also a bit more information than you were actually asking for. But this past March, was it? Yeah, March was when was or April, Ghoulish Book Festival.
It was April, I believe.
Yeah, April. Max got married, and there Max and I got married, and it was me and Andrew Hilbert and Zach Chapman were all involved in that whatsoever. It was either before the thing or after the ceremony. We're like, let's go take a shit. And we're all cracking up at the idea of us taking a shit. And so we go into the bathroom and we all take a shit and we take a picture of all of our feet from the bottom. It's the weirdest fucking thing. I don't know why we do that. I don't know why men are like this, but we did it. I thought
That's funny.
so when this happened here, I was just cracking up. But I digress. So no more. Well, actually, there's a couple more toilet shots, and we'll get to there. But no more from me. In the bathroom, they hear John Denver playing over the radio. And of course, if everybody doesn't know, John Denver was a musician who died in a plane crash. So in the film, Todd's name is spelled with one D instead of the traditional spelling of, Todd. So in German, Todd, Tod, means death. So I
Hmm,
thought that was a pretty cool
that's
connection.
interesting.
Yeah. So the song that is playing is John Denver. I actually don't know the name of the title, the title of the song, but the lyrics are like "raining fire in the sky," which is pretty spot on, right?
Sure.
Because we're gonna see it later. So then there's a crying baby on the flight, and then there's also like a physically disabled person as well. And I believe it was who says it? Carter. Yeah, I believe it's Carter who says, it'd have to be a pretty fucked up God to take down this flight, right? So he's like, I'm pretty happy that they're on here. Or maybe it was George, the brother George, regardless, somebody says it. So Todd goes to his seat and he tries to sit next to these pretty girls, Krista and Blake, but they ask to switch seats with them and he says no. So they go back and ask Alex to do it. He says yes, even though Todd was giving him the international sign for "I'm going to choke you to death,"
Yeah.
which is actually foreshadowing Todd's own death, right?
I didn't
So
pick up on that. Yeah.
yeah, and also they are sitting in the worst seat possible, which I just mentioned earlier, which is the last row of the airplane when you're right in front of the bathroom. So you have to go back. You have to whiff. You get the whiff of the people coming in and back of the bathroom every time, and it fucking sucks. Um, That was another toilet joke for me.
See,
Sorry.
I'm just gonna keep track now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So Todd was pretty angry, but Alex was like, "What? What did you think you're gonna like titty fuck them over Iceland?" Which is pretty funny. I have to say the humor is pretty sophomoric at times in the movie, but I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that's what you're signing up for with the teen movie, right? So I mean, as far as yeah, teen movie goes, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot of cringy stuff in here. You know, there wasn't a lot of there wasn't, to my knowledge, from what I'm recollecting, like racial stuff. There wasn't a lot
Sure.
of homophobic stuff from what I'm remembering. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but like whenever I'm seeing these like 90s and early to mid 2000s movies, you're always like, oh man, we're gonna see some problematic shit.
Yeah.
And I didn't really catch on that. Did you catch anything like that?
No, I mean no, I mean other than like the obvious, and I'm sure everyone's commented on this a million times, but they're all white, all the friends are all
Yeah,
white or whatever, but
yeah,
that's to be expected at the time. I mean, what are you gonna do at
no
this,
representation.
but other than that, I mean, I mean, yeah, I didn't think it was anything egregious that I remember anyway.
Yeah, and so then he goes and he realizes that his tray table won't stay up. Then he's seeing lots of small signs. He's still very nervous. The plane takes off, and Mr. Murnau tells them something in French, which I don't speak French. I don't know what he says, and they all get excited and start clapping. And then they start experience turbulence immediately, but they level off. But as soon as they level off, they experience turbulence once again, and it's going on and shaking. Luggage falls out. There's Billy was eating Whoppers, and he spills the Whoppers on the floor, and the oxygen bags fall down. The plane starts to list, and then there's an explosion as part of the plane opens up and people are sucked out. Then there's one final explosion as Alex is engulfed in flames. And I thought the CGI looked pretty decent here.
Yeah, I mean, I liked when he got burned up. I mean, that I was like, oh wow, they're really going for it. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Again, 2000, pretty decent CGI. I mean, just a couple years before this, or even around this time, like the Scorpion King came out, and the Scorpion King had some of the worst CGI you'll ever see in your life. And so I thought this was pretty good. And also just the depiction of an airplane crash in midair. Like you're always thinking a plane crashes. It technically didn't crash. It was an explosion, right?
Sure.
But like I'm always thinking crash, it crashes when it lands, but or or falls or whatever. But this was an explosion. And I thought it was a pretty good depiction. And obviously, I don't think you don't get this movie post 9/11, right? Or if you do, it
No,
comes out a decade later or something like that,
sure.
right? But this movie came out a year before, and a lot of stuff that happens in this movie, you're just like, wow, this is a pre 9/11 world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was a really great shot because they moved to, inside the airport with the window in the background and they're like arguing and fighting and then for, the way it exploded in the background, like, oh man, that's pretty cool. It's like it's an image that you don't forget.
Yeah, and that's going to come in a second. But right now, he wakes up and realizes it was just a dream or a vision,
Mm,
whatever you want to call it. And he quickly switches seats and he runs to his seat and he sees that his tray table will still not stay up. So now he realizes that it's a premonition or a vision. The flight attendant and Mr. Murnau ask him if there's a problem, and then Carter is immediately angry at him and it says, "What the fuck is your problem?" And Alex yells, "This fucking plane is going to explode." And again, such a 2000 movie, right? Because if this happened right now, immediately you'd be tackled by an air marshal and arrested and taken off the plane. But Carter like immediately wants to fight him and ends up punching him in the face. I'm like, Carter, dude, what the fuck is your problem, man? Calm down. Like he's on 10 always. And we all kind of like, I knew somebody like this in high school, right?
yeah, I wasn't that confused me a little bit. Like why was I always so angry about everything? But I guess that's just supposed to be his character, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Just a
Yeah.
angry high school bully asshole sort of thing.
Mm,
So they take him off the plane. Todd goes to check on him. Both teachers go to check on him. Claire gets off as well, and so does Billy. And then um, the Mrs. Luton is speaking with the captain. Is like, one of us needs to go on a plane, either me or the French teacher. and she tells the French teacher to go, Mr. Murnau. So he gets on the plane. But then, so that leaves, Carter and Billy are off the plane, and Alex and Clear and Mrs. Luton, and then I forgot her name, Terry. Terry as well gets off the plane. The plane pulls away from the gate. Alex tells him he saw everything. He saw the plane blowing up. Carter again is making fun of him and he yells at him. And Alex rushes him and says, "The only trip you're going to take is to the hospital," which was like such a silly line,
Yeah.
but it cracked me up. And then Billy watches the airplane leave and he says, "There they go, and here we stay." And then Alex yells out to Carter, "I wish you were on that plane." As soon as he says that, suddenly, like you were saying in the background, there's an explosion and the windows explode as well as the plane. It's blown up and they all look at each other shocked. This was that great shot that you were talking about, which I thought was great. Yeah, it was great because we've already seen the plane explode once. We weren't expecting it to see it again through that view. So it's kind of a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's probably the part, like the image I remember the most from this movie, I think.
Later, they're all in a room together. They're all looking at Alex like he caused it. He says he didn't. And Claire says, "Yeah, of course he did. He's not a witch." So then we are introduced to Agent Ween and Agent Shrek of the FBI. They say, "We're here to, ask you what happened." And then there might be a potential criminal investigation. And then they look at Alex. So they're interrogating him and they ask him why he said, "Listen to me, this plane will explode on takeoff." And they ask him if he's on any drugs or anything like that. And he's like, "No, I'm not. I wasn't on any drugs. He just had a premonition." They ask him why he said, "I hope you're on that plane." He's like, "Well, I didn't really think it was going to happen." And then once he says that, they're like, "Well, why'd you get off the plane then?" So I thought I like that. That was a pretty cool line. I don't know. I thought the writing, although like yes, like it's a teen slasher, but to me, some of it felt smart, at least competent. What did you think overall of the writing of the story?
I
And it
thought
could
it
be
was,
different. It could be different. You may not
I
agree.
mean, I thought, I mean, I I think that the idea of the story, there's a lot to it, because, you start delving into destiny and predetermination and, there are a lot of philosophical aspects to what they're talking about here,
Yeah.
in in the guise of a teen slasher kind of movie, because they're trying to escape their own fate or their own mortality, right? I thought those are very interesting themes for a teen movie. So in that regard, yeah, I thought it was interesting. It's almost like you can think a lot about what they don't actually say in the movie, but what they imply, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but there were some things that, like, they're not problems, but things that I found myself wondering about that I wish they had almost like given a line or two about. So for example, and maybe you can tell me because you've seen the other movies, it doesn't appear that this person is generally a prognosticator, that he can tell the future, except for this one time. Like, is that true in the other movies too? These people, it's just this is the one time they do it. Because I'm curious, like, why this? Like, why can they see this? And maybe it's just a function of this is what we need to make the movie work. But it's interesting to me that they've never demonstrated this before or after, I'm guessing, and this one time they can see it, I guess. Because that
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that because you're saying, oh, not a witch, but he could see it. He did see it though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they don't really explain why he can see it or why Clear has this connection with him that is really ridiculous, and we'll get to that point.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So let's hold off on that pretty good writing that I just said. Let's wait till after the movie,
I mean,
actually.
in general, I mean that's just a point I was considering. But like, if you're going to make a movie with this premise, right? And I'm sensitive to this, as a writer. If you're going to make a movie with the premise, there's lots of different ways you could have gone. But it's tough to tackle because it's a lot to try to. it's a wonderful idea. Well, how do you actually go about executing an idea about somebody who cheated death and death's coming for them? This is probably about as good as you're going to do, unless it's in the hands of some grand auteur or something. I mean, this is a good passable attempt at that.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think what I thought was that thinking about it now, I should say maybe in the other movies they don't, from what I remember, they don't seem to be prognosticators or like clairvoyant or anything like that. I wonder if they're going for clairvoyant with Claire,
Oh yeah,
or clear, but anyway,
yeah.
but um, that it's just their time and death has come for them.
Okay. So there's not as clear somebody saw it beforehand in the other movies.
Um, no, there is a in every movie somebody sees it
Sees
beforehand
it. Okay, I
and
got you.
then
Okay,
nobody believes them, sort of thing.
okay,
So that's what
okay.
that kind of is the same throughout the rest of the movies.
Got you. Okay.
But yeah, so then back to the FBI's, they're kind of interviewing everybody. They're interviewing Todd, and Todd explains that he got off because his brother told him to get off, but his brother George stayed on the plane. And I cannot imagine the guilt one would feel if I left and my brother stayed on the plane and he ended up dying because of that. Or
Sure.
yeah, that's unimaginable. But so he's saying that he left because his brother told him to. They asked Claire why she got the plane, and since she wasn't friends with these people at all, and she said she got off because she believed Alex. So at this point, all of their parents arrive, all except Clear's. They drop her off at home alone, it looks like. Later, in his home, Alex breaks down and gets a hug from his mom, and his dad is kind of looking over as well, which I felt like this was kind of needed because I don't know. Up to this point, like he had a pretty nice relationship with his parents. They seemed pretty. They weren't like fighting or yelling or anything like that. And so I like to see that they actually cared for him and all that. So it's kind
Sure.
of nice.
Sure.
On the news, we hear that there are no known survivors and there were 287 deaths. So his mom killed 287 people
It's true.
so far. So far, there's so many more.
Yeah,
And then does that count for the rest of the series then? Like,
that's a good
did she set into motion
question.
everything? But I'll table that until we get to the until I get to do the last Final Destination. So
Hmm.
later, 39 days have passed, and they're commemorating that with a an event. 39 students died. 39 students and teachers died. 39 days later, so they unveil a memorial of an eagle kind of spreading its wings. Two things. One, it's a huge statue. I think it takes more than 39 days to make that. So they probably, it wasn't special order. They probably just bought it off the shelf. Two, we died in flight in
Oh
the
yeah,
air.
yeah, I know.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, I thought that
necessarily
too.
want the
A
commemoration of
depiction
the
of this
statue.
flying thing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. Yeah, I know. I know.
that's
That's pretty
very
hilarious.
insensitive. If anything, it should be on the ground. It should be like a they're all in a car on the ground or something
I,
like that.
I I do wonder what their thought process was behind that. That's or maybe they meant for us to take issue with it. I don't know. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. So then we see the FBI agents are there as well. So Carter is once again angry. He says, "You don't tell me what to do with my life. I'm never going to die." He says he's very angry that basically Alex saved his life. Billy tells him that he got his license and that the instructor, he said he barely passed, and the instructor told him that he's going to die young, which isn't a good thing for an instructor to tell somebody, right? But then he then ends up asking Alex if he's going to die young, and also should he ask out Cynthia? If he asks out Cynthia, will she say yes? So basically, he thinks that Alex is a psychic.
Yeah.
Uh, I like Billy as a character. What did you think? What did you think of Billy?
No, I liked him. I liked him. I mean, it's like it's
Comic
it's it
relief.
it's the kind of character that really makes you feel like you're having a good time watching the movie. And then that's kind of what these are supposed to be because, horror and comedy go hand in hand so well. So you need someone like him because, I assume most of the people going to watch this were like teenagers on date night going out, and this is exactly the kind of stuff that that you'd want to see, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I just realized that the first movie you chose was like Don't Look Now, or right?
It's totally
And then
different. Yeah.
which is a complete like almost art house horror movie. And then the second one is Final Destination. You're probably like, what the fuck did I choose?
But
So
you know
then
what? It was on my list. I really had meant to watch it at some point. So it was perfect timing.
okay, great. So Alex goes up to Mrs. Luton and she immediately says, "Don't talk to me. You scare the hell out of me." Which is a weird, mean thing for a teacher to say, but honestly, I kind of like it. It's like true to her character, you know?
But don't you think it's weird that he saved these people's lives and they're like furious with him or like they're scared? I mean, like, I get that it's weird, but he did save your life. Couldn't you show him a little bit of kindness? Like, I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Like, well, um, that one character Carter is always angry, um,
Hmm.
so he's not going to say anything. But even somebody like what is her name? Terry. I don't remember her name because she had very little to do. She just has one memorable death and that's it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
Terry just says nothing to her. She just like is always breaking up the fights between Alex and Carter, but she never really says anything. And she never says thank you. I think the only person who's nice to him and decent to him is Clear.
clear.
Right?
Yeah.
Billy is just like he's just a nice person, so it's not mean to him at all, but he's just an idiot. So yeah, I do find that odd. But to be honest, if I were ever in a situation like no, I think I would be really grateful. I think I'd be
I think
grateful.
I would too. I don't know, man. Like, I'd
Yeah,
be dead right now if it weren't for you. Like, I
yeah.
don't know.
I'd be something like, "You never have to buy a beer around me ever." It's like, "Oh, cool, thanks."
Yeah,
So he tells Todd. So he meets up Todd. Todd's there, and he tells Todd that he misses him, but to not take it the wrong way. This was a bit cringy, right? Because like you should be able to tell your friend, your probably your best friend since you're a kid, that you miss them without having to tell them, "Don't take this the wrong way."
sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And so that was probably a bit cringy there, but Todd agrees and says he misses him too, but Todd's father doesn't want him hanging around with him. He says, when my dad is feeling better, we could take a trip to the city and catch the Yankees. So then Clear gives him a flower. This is where we say Clear gives him a flower and says, thank you. Because of you, I'm still alive. Right. So that was nice.
sure.
One small nice. You know, to me, he uh Alex feels a bit like Erasmo that he can't catch a break.
That's true. Yeah, no, I agree. He's trying to help everybody and
Yeah.
yeah, things keep going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's basically like he's investigating in this movie, right? Like kind of
Yeah.
like Erasmo
Yeah,
who's
he's trying to figure out like, how can I save these people and all that,
yeah.
you know.
The thing about that is like you're saying the reason why like Scream is in your wheelhouse is because of who done it. It's a who done it. And
Sure.
this one, it's not a who done it. It's more like a who's next and how they're gonna die sort of thing.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
I think it's kind of perfect. I think the reason why this movie kind of garnered the following that it did and got so popular was because a lot of people only watch horror, not only, but a large contingent of, in myself included, sometimes when we're watching slashers, we're kind of watching for the kills,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is right up that alley. You can see, like, yeah, I can see why it spawned so many sequels. Because yeah, oh, how did they die this time or whatever? So it's like the perfect vehicle to deliver a bunch of like crazy different types of kills. So it's brilliant. I mean, it's kind of a brilliant idea to serve as a carrier of whatever kind of kills you want to come up with.
And you don't have to worry about the mask looking the same from movie to movie like they had to do with Halloween, or keeping the same actor like they had to do with Nightmare on Elm Street, or or different versions of like how Freddy or Jason looks, something like that. Like it's just no, it's just death. It's just death.
It's just death, but like it lends itself to so much inventiveness. You know what I mean? It could be freaking toilet water, or it could be a huge log, or it could be a kitchen appliance. Like, and again, not to get too deep with it or whatever, but death lurks around every corner. We just kind of choose not to think about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, if I could trip with this fork and like poke my eye out and be blind the rest of my life, but if you think about it, you would never do anything. You know what I mean? But it really kind of illustrates to you how dangerous things around us are. But we have to ignore that to function in real life, I guess.
Yeah. I would if I stopped to think about all the different all times I could have died for being a stupid teen and like 20-year-old, and I wouldn't be able to function now. But
Yeah.
so you did say a toilet and a big log, and I said I wasn't going to make any more humor, the toilet humor, but I couldn't pass that one.
I set it up for you, man. Come on, there you go.
But yeah. So then, so Todd is reading at the ceremony, and he says, "We say that the hour of death cannot be forecast, but when we say this, we imagine that the hour is placed in an obscure and distant future, just like you were saying right now. It never occurs to us that it has any connection with the day already begun, or that death could arrive this same afternoon, this afternoon, which is so certain and which has every hour filled in advance." So you were talking about like heavy handedness. I think this served A, to kind of be the premise of the film, but also heavy handed in that we know now that Todd is going to die. You know, it's kind of like, this is their "I'll be right back" sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, teen slashers aren't known for their subtlety, so there you go. You
Yeah.
know.
So later at night, Todd is in his bathroom when death arrives in the form of the wind coming through the window, and it blows the door closed. And then for a second time in half an hour, we see Todd taking a shit. That's the last time. That's it. So then the water starts to leak from the water line of the toilet. And then we go to Alex's house. We see that he's become kind of infatuated in the, what, month and a half or so since the airplane crash. He's kind of become infatuated with the airplane crashes. And I'm like, yes, it's a research scene. And he kind of gets bored or tired after a while. And then he pulls out a copy of Penthouse from 1987, which just, oh man, physical porn, physical porn. What a world we lived in.
Yeah.
Um, so then back with Todd, he's shaving, and he somehow manages to nick himself with a safety razor, which I don't know how he does that. You really have to try it, unless there was a pimple there or something like that. But anyway, in the mirror, we see kind of this shadow cross over. And I think this is our first premonition of like the shadow of death, because we didn't get this in the airplane scene, I don't think.
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah. Yeah. So then he starts trimming his nose with the scissors. And this scene, I think this happens in part two. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a scene in which somebody's trimming their nose hairs and it goes further than what happens here. And I was so thankful that it didn't happen here, because I always, I had a pair of those nose trimmers that were rounded.
Hmm.
That's what I use, and I lost those, and now the ones I have now are sharp. And every time I use it, I'm always like cringing, like, oh.
Yeah.
So he also plugs in a radio, and he hears John Denver, and I'm sorry, I forget if he unplugs it after he hears a song or not, but I don't think he does. And then he moves his feet just in time before the water hits him. Back with Alex, an owl bangs into his window, and he throws his penthouse at it. The penthouse gets shredded up by the fan, and a piece of paper lands on it. It just says Todd on it instead of like today. So that's his premonition that something's going to happen to Todd. Back with Todd in his bathroom, he's about to take a shower, and he's removing the clothesline. Do you want to describe what happens here? Do you remember?
I mean, it was a little confusing, but
Yeah,
in essence, it ends up kind of wrapped around his neck, I
yeah,
guess. And as he sinks down, it kind of tightens up and he ends up choking and he's reaching for like, I think is it scissors or something to try
yeah,
to cut it and he just can't quite reach it.
yeah. It's an absolutely terrible, like terrible scene as far as like horrible, like a horrible way to die, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I've never seen a drying line on.
Yeah.
And so I was really, it's kind of new to me there. But essentially, yeah, he's got like a drying line and hooked up there. He slips on the water from the toilet and slips in the wire, wraps around his neck, and then some shampoo or some soap um, falls onto the floor of the bathtub, and so it's completely slippery, and he can't catch his footing to get up, and so he ends up just choking himself to death. His eyes turn blood red. He can't breathe, and just he ends up dying. It's a terrible scene, horrific, but I don't know. I thought it was a great death scene. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'm kind of impressed how they used everyday normal items, shampoo, water, to create something fairly horrific. That's interesting to me. I like that because I would imagine that was a challenging thing to do, to take these everyday normal items and create something memorable like that.
Yeah. So then Alex arrives at Todd's house, but he's too late, and he sees agents Shrek and Ween there. But Clear is hiding behind a tree and tells Alex to get out of here. But then Todd's dad goes up to it and asks, didn't you see it? Didn't you see this death happening? And then he says, Todd killed himself because of George. And then Alex says, well, why would he make plans with me if he was going to kill himself? It doesn't make any sense. So the next day, Alex goes to visit Clear. He asked her why she was there last night, and she says that she knows enough to know that the FBI agents don't investigate teen suicides, so they're still investigating the cause of the crash. So they don't know what caused it yet. So I like this. It kind of explains why the FBI would still be following him.
Sure, sure. I did have a question, so maybe you can answer this, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. So they think he committed suicide because it looks exactly like he committed suicide, right? With the thing around his neck. Um, Now, do you think that like Death did this on purpose to throw them off the scent, which would be weird because Death shouldn't be afraid of going to jail or anything like that. So
Yeah,
why it or was it just a coincidence that they just assumed it was suicide? I couldn't quite tell if it was intentional by Death or not.
I see. So you're saying is why wouldn't death make it something more obvious? Like,
Yeah, like why go to the trouble of like making it look like a suicide kind of thing? Or maybe he did. Maybe it was just happenstance. Just
yeah,
a thought.
okay. Well, let's think of the next death. When we get there, let's think whether or not it could be
Something else.
something else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So Clear shows him a sculpture that she made and tells him that it's him, not an actual represent or not a lifelike vision of him, but how he makes her feel. And this is the beginning of a really weird relationship that is never shown to us, but apparently they're each other's loves of their lives, sort of thing. Very weird. And then while she's doing this, it's like she's grabbing the shaft and saying, like, this reminds me of you. And I was like, what is happening right now? It's very weird. She says the sculpture doesn't know what or why it is. It's reluctant to take form, creating an absolute but incomprehensible attraction. This right here kind of makes sense. Creating an absolute but incomprehensible attraction, because I don't know why, not to know why she's attracted to him, but the power of the attraction so quickly, right? Did you pick up on this?
Well, I mean, I didn't really fully understand any of this, to be honest with you. Like the even that they did have any kind of connection at all. Like I didn't understand like why or what she was talking about.
Yeah,
Like I almost felt like, she was at the house, at Todd's house or whatever when he shows up there. And like they were like, we need a reason why she was there. How about they have some kind of weird connection we can't explain? Okay, that sounds good to me. Like I didn't
yeah,
quite fully get any of that in a rational way, but maybe it's not supposed to be rational. I don't know.
yeah. And I guess the, the weird thing is they didn't need to be strangers. If they wanted a romantic relationship, they could have
Sure,
just
that
made
makes
them
sense too.
boyfriend or girlfriend
You're
or
you're you're right. Yeah, you're right. Like they go from zero to having this real intimate bond that we're supposed to believe right away. Like I don't know, it was a little weird.
yeah. And maybe it's not that even like we can't even say between when the accident happened to like 39 days later when they're at the memorial that they grew closer there, because it seems like she hadn't talked to him since then
You're
because
right.
she
No,
gives him that flower.
you're right. You're absolutely right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
They,
just
I don't
all
know.
right. I take back the writing thing.
Yeah.
Let's wait. Let's get into the ending before we talk about that. But so she says, I didn't see what you saw, but I felt it. I can still feel you. That's why I was there last night. So he says he wishes he could see Todd one last time. So Clear says, well, let's go see him then. And so they just randomly just go break into a funeral home. And then she says, this gives me a rush doing something I'm not supposed to, which is kind of weird. So they see Todd and he kind of spasms a bit, and that kind of scares them. And then we meet Bloodworth, played by Tony Motherfucking Todd. And he says, shh, you'll wake the dead. And I think this was an attempt by them to have something close to a physical representation of death, but because I read up on future installments of the movie, and he is not death. He is more like somebody who understands death, but he is not death. So he's not, controlling any of this, So I think they needed to put a face to something here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you felt.
Um, I mean, I thought it was weird. I mean, I guess the first thing is that the first thing he didn't say is, "Hey, what the hell are y'all doing in here? Like,
Yeah.
get the fuck out of here." That was so that was weird. But then he immediately goes to just dropping a bunch of knowledge about death. I,
Yeah.
it's just a weird transition or a weird like just plopped in. It felt like it needed a little more like I don't know, a little more at the beginning of it to at least be like, hey, y'all shouldn't be here. Hey, well, we're here because of this. Oh, well, death is a tough thing. And then maybe, I don't know, an easier segue to explain why he just starts dropping all his knowledge about death. But yeah, I mean, I like the sentiment that you have this really cool ass character coming in, saying a bunch of interesting things. It just felt a little jarring, like kind of out of nowhere almost.
Yeah, almost like an exposition dump. Like they needed
Yeah, there
somebody
you
to do
go.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
They then see cuticle lacerations around his neck, and Bloodworth explains that he was pulling at the wire. Then Alex is like, "Oh, then you realize it wasn't an accident if he was pulling at the wire." But I don't think that's true, because even if you intended to kill yourself, I
Sure.
think there's a
Reflexively, you'll
reflexively
reach for
you're
it.
you're doing
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
but then Bloodworth says, "In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no escapes. What you have to realize is that we're just a mouse that a cat has by the tail. Every single move we make, from the mundane to the monumental, the red light that we stop at or run, the people we have sex with or won't have sex with us, the airplanes that we ride or walk out of, it's all part of death's sadistic design, leading to the grave. If you figure out the design, you can cheat death."
Yeah, okay, this is going to sound kind of like maybe too nitpicky or whatever, but I also kind of have a problem that him working in a mortuary automatically makes him an expert on the philosophies of death. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
going to mortuary school automatically gives you philosophical insights into actual death, but I digress.
Okay. So you say that, and I agree with you. However, just a couple weeks ago on my show, I had a funeral director, Sarah, on,
Oh man, I'm
and
about to get put in my place. See, this is what I got.
no. But she stated that, since a young age, she's kind of been very like kind of drawn to death, and not in a creepy like
Hmm.
gothic sort of vibe, but just like, like she had a lot of death in her family, or friends, and she would always be there to comfort people, right? Then when she became a funeral director, and she also was an embalmist, she was able to embalm. After that, she's worked with somebody to create a cemetery that was all natural burials and stuff like that, and they're all kind of really into that. And she had like a philosophy on life and death.
Hmm.
And so this is
She
the
could have been
only,
Bloodworth.
yeah, she could have been, exactly. This is the only funeral director I've met, or like or a person who works in the funeral home. And so I'm 100% rate people like this. So, but yeah, she could have been Bloodworth. But I was just
Yeah.
mentioning that. But I understand where you're coming from, because before that interview, I would have been the same way. You
Hmm.
know,
That's very interesting.
yeah. So then he says, if you can figure out the design, you can cheat death. You've already done that by walking off the plane. Your friend's departure shows that death has a new design for all of you. Now you can figure out Now you have to figure out how and when it's coming back at you. Play your hunch, Alex, if you think you can get away with it. But remember, the risk of cheating the plan, of disrespecting the design, could initiate a fury that would terrorize even the Grim Reaper. And you don't even want to fuck with that, Mac Daddy.
Hmm.
Weird thing there, but okay. So then immediately they say, okay, I'm sorry we broke in. And he says, no harm, no foul. I'll see you soon. This felt a little bit weird. Like, okay, we got the information we need and we're leaving.
Yeah. Let me throw in a basketball term too while we're at it. And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So the next day, Clear and Alex are talking about omens. He shows her the scrap of paper that said Todd, but Clear doesn't believe him. Alex sees a bus pass by in the reflection of a glass, but when he looks, the bus isn't actually there. He says, we messed up Death's design. We cheated Death. What if we're not meant to get off that plane? If it is, then it's not finished and we will die unless we find the patterns and can cheat it again. So then Carter pulls up listening to a very 2000 song that's literally singing the words Final Destination. I think this ended up, when I was reading after it, ended up being I can't think of the band's name anymore, but do you recognize the song?
I did not.
Okay, cool. Not your type of music, not my type of music. It was very clearly like a 90s 2000 song. So then he just busts a U-turn and almost runs Billy over, and which is hilarious. Their interactions are always hilarious. And then Mrs. Luton also comes out of a store, so it's a kind of a reunion. We find out that Mrs. Luton is moving. Terry yells at Todd that Terry yells at Carter that it's time to move on because she was trying to fight Alex again. She's like, she's not going to let the crash be the most important thing in her life. She's moving on. And if you want to spend the rest of your life beating up Alex every time you see him, then you can. Every time you see him, then you can drop fucking dead. Did you want to say, do you remember what happens here?
Go ahead and say it.
Yeah. So she steps off the curb and she's immediately splattered by the bus. And the bus is probably going 100 miles an hour or something like that to be splattered that quickly. And then blood splatters on everybody's faces. And that's two of them down. So we were trying to remember whether or not this could be thought to be suicide. And I guess walking in front of
It
a
could be an
bus could
accident,
be
I guess.
suicide. It could
I
be an
guess,
accident.
yeah,
It could
it
be
could be an
suicide.
accident. Yeah, so I guess it could. Hey, was this before or after Meet Joe Black? Because they have a similar scene where
Uh,
do you remember that? Where
I never
that's
saw
how he
the
died?
movie, but
Okay.
I don't know when it came out, but I could look it up.
Hmm.
So
But
they had a similar scene to
yeah, where one of the characters gets hit by a bus. But
1998 was Meet Joe Black.
okay. And then I
So
think it happened in Felicity too, except that guy dies. I only know this because I had a friend who was obsessed with
the
Felicities,
TV show.
the TV show. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So what being killed by a bus is I guess a common thing in TV shows and movies.
Yeah. Um, so at this point, I want to talk about the death scenes and what they use. So because that looked very real,
Hmm.
and all the death scenes were filmed using life casts of the actual characters. And I wasn't familiar with what life casting is. So if you're not either, life casting is a process of creating a three-dimensional copy of a living human body through the use of molding and casting
Hmm.
techniques. The most common life casts are 3D hand casting, casting of torsos, pregnant bellies, faces, and the like. Um, and it copies and it's basically an exact copy of the body. It's usually limited to a section of the body, but full body casts are achievable also. Compared with other three-dimensional representations of humans, the standout feature of life casts is their high level of realism and detail. Life casts can replicate details as small as fingerprints and pores. So the life
Wow.
cast, they just filled them with blood and set them up and have them run over, and that's what happens.
Wow. I wonder if they still do that nowadays or it's all CGI kind of
I'm sure
stuff.
there's like a combination of both,
Uh, hmm.
And I remember reading that one of the blood that splattered on one of their faces was like in the shape of a seven, which is how many of them there are.
Ah,
So that was cool.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Hmm.
So on the news, Alex sees that there's a new theory about the why the plane blew up, and I don't really understand it, so I'm going to try my very best. And if it's not right, I'm sorry, I tried. So, but he matches the explosion, and it's basically with a seating chart, and it starts at one seat, it ends at another seat, and it's the exact path of the explosion. And at first, Todd was supposed to die, then Terry, and so they're dying in the order that they would have died, and that's death's design. And according to the chart, Mrs. Luton is next. At Mrs. Luton's house, she's on the phone. She's telling somebody that she's hoping that this change will be best for her. She's moving. Everywhere she looks, she sees the kids, and then she's like, I look up at my front lawn and I see them, but she sees nothing but fear. As she says that, she sees Alex, and she immediately calls Agent Shrek. And then we see Alex is kind of inspecting her car tires, and as he's doing that, the agents pull up and tell him to get in the car, and they kind of roughly put him in the car. My question or my thing was that, like, he's not thinking, but he's kind of probably the same age as Erasmo is, and Erasmo kind of goes forward and just doesn't think about things and does them, and that I kind of feel like that's what what's his name here, Alex is doing too. He's just kind of charging forward without thinking about how things will look.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess, I mean, it's kind of understandable why as you're watching it. Like he's just trying to do the right thing. He's trying to save this person and all that. Of course, as the audience were like cringing, like, no, no, you're leaving your footprint or
Yeah,
don't do that. But I guess, making those split second decisions. I mean, I could see why he kind of did what he did, I guess.
yeah,
Although, the other thing is it's like, like I think it's easy for us, I think, to be like, why did you do that? When I think what the filmmakers would probably want us to think is this dude's whole classmates all just died and another one just died in front of like he's having premonitions. He's probably so screwed up in the head at this point that nothing he does is going to make very much sense probably. But I still think what he did was barely defensible if he's trying to save somebody.
yeah. So then with the agents, Alex explains that he believes Mrs. Luton is next, and he explains his pattern theory. Back with Miss Luton, death has arrived in the form of the wind. Um, and she puts on John Denver as well. Um, Back with the agents, Alex says that, kind of like what you said earlier, that he's saved 6 lives, but everybody thinks that he's a freak. He's kind of like had it. He's like, I should be a hero, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So with Mrs. Luton, she thinks that she sees a shadow in the reflection of a tea kettle. So once again, death has arrived. Agent Ween tells him that they know. So back with Alex, I should say, Agent Ween tells him that they know he didn't blow up the plane, but now they're kind of getting suspicious because everybody around him is starting to die. And then they ask him basically what's happening, and Alex says that he can't promise nobody else will die. So Agent Shrek, sorry, they let Alex go. Then Agent Shrek says, that kid gives me the creeps. I almost believed him for a second. And then Agent Ween says, don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes you give me the creeps, which again, great humor. So Mrs. Luton grabs some vodka and ice and puts it in a mug, but the mug cracks and is leaking. And I thought this was kind of like, okay, at first I was like, yeah, right. The mug fucking cracks at just the right time. But what they showed was that she kept the vodka in the freezer, and vodka doesn't freeze. It needs to be very, very low to freeze or whatever. So it could be extremely cold. And then she also grabs some ice and she puts that into a room temperature mug. And so that could break like regular glass. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe it could break the ceramic as well. I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine. I mean, I thought like the untold thing was like death really broke the glass, basically, like so this thing would happen. So I'm okay with all that. Just
Okay.
kind of like death is the one who let the water out of the toilet and death,
Yeah, that's true.
unloosening some screws or whatever. I mean, I'm okay with all of that stuff.
Yeah. So she's walking around and with the vodka leaking out of her mug, and it leaks all over her computer, which causes it to short. Then Mrs. Luton examines the smoke that's coming out of her monitor, and behind her we see an image of a large dagger in the background. It's part of a design of her stained glass window or stained glass door. And this was purposeful foreshadowing of how she would die. Right? And we're going to get to that in a second.
Hmm.
So she goes to inspect the computer and it blows up in her face, and a jagged piece of it pierces her throat, and she pushes back, blood squirting everywhere. The piece of glass that went into Mrs. Newton's neck from the computer was done backwards. They shot the glass being yanked away from her neck with a line, which was then digitally erased.
Hmm. Interesting.
So Alex is walking home and he sees somebody burning some leaves, and he takes this as a sign that Mrs. Luton is going to die by fire, I guess, which is kind of a leap.
Yeah, well, you know,
Yeah.
we've already mentioned some of the writing is suspect.
Yeah. 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 So then Mrs. Luton is bleeding everywhere. It's kind of very gory. And then the fire follows her based off of the vodka trail that she left
Hmm.
and ends up blowing up the bottle of vodka, which causes her to fall to the floor. And I was thinking, so that means that she was drinking straight vodka, no mixer in that mug, right? So she basically did like a Molotov cocktail on herself.
Hmm. Yeah.
So as she's laying on the floor, she's kind of reaching for a rag that's above her to stop the blood. I'm thinking back now to a scene in The Devil's Promise with blood and the neck and all that. And so
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
so basically you ripped off Final Destination for your book. Like,
That's what I did.
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I just finished reading this less than 12 hours ago. So it's on my mind, and I'm drawing all these connections. So,
yeah.
um, I think Erasmo was a better written character than Alex was. So I'm
Well,
not
that's
drawing the comparisons to that.
no, there are movies that I had in mind for that. This wasn't one of them. Maybe I think like Rosemary's Baby was kind of one that I had in mind.
Okay, actually,
But
I would love to talk about that on the Sunday school session.
yeah, let's do it.
On the floor, she reaches for the rag to stop the blood. The rag is on top of a block of knives, and as she pulls the rag, the knives fall and impale her. So when the knife impales her, actress Kristen Cloak was put under a fake wooden floor with the silicone body on top. This was so the knife could impale the character without injuring the actor. So I thought this looked pretty good. What did you think?
No, I liked it. I mean, I kind of like the kind of like escalating like problems that are leading to the death. So it's not, I like how it's not just one thing. You know, it starts off with something small like the glass breaking, and it's almost like a domino, like one happens after the other, and it builds some suspense, not because you're not sure if they're going to die, but exactly what is it going to be? Even way back from the first death, you think, oh, is it going to be electrocution? Is it going to be those scissors are going to go up his nose? And so it draws you in until you really want to see how it's actually going to happen, you know? And
Yeah,
so I appreciated how everything kind of slowly unfolds until, you know, you see her pulling on the thing that's going to bring the knives down. You're like, oh wow, so this is the final culmination kind of thing. So I thought it was cool.
yeah. So then Alex runs to help, but he gets to the house and he ends up pulling out one of the knives like a fucking idiot, and then drops it and leaves his fingerprints on the knife and also bloody
Yeah.
footprints.
Yeah, I hear you. I
And then
know.
he run. That's frustrating. That is really frustrating.
Now, I maybe I missed it, but like, did the house not burn up? Like, wouldn't that have burned up all the evidence, or did the fire not burn everything? Or I,
So that was something that I had a question on for you, because as someone who's like just wrote our blood cults into your book, The Devil's Promise, um, Billy says something later on here. He says that, not now, but later, he says that he guesses the blood caramelized and they found his prints on the knife and also his shoe prints. And I thought, I don't think that's how that works at all.
yeah, I didn't specifically research blood caramelizing, but that does sound like immense bullshit to me.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
does he have diabetes? Is there that much sugar in his blood? Like, what is happening?
I mean, I think you and I have both consumed a lot of horror books and movies in which there's a lot of blood, and I don't think I've ever once heard about blood caramelizing and using it to track somebody down or whatever. Like,
Have
I think we'd have heard
literally
about this before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've literally never heard that as a saying at all, like
yeah.
before or after this movie. But
And in fairness, I have to give kudos to the writers, man. If you're gonna make up some bullshit, just you got to go all in and make it sound believable. I mean, it's all right.
yeah. Although I think like blood is like 90% water or something like that. It would definitely get evaporated. But who knows? Who the fuck knows?
Y-
I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
So Billy sees him running out of the house. Just as the house explodes, Alex runs away. Later, Carter and Billy run into each other, and Carter says, "You dick." But Clear shows up as well. So she told them to meet her there. She says that the FBI is following her, so she needs them to take her to Alex because he knows who's going to die next. So in the back, Billy tells Carter not to speed, and Carter says he's getting a vision that Billy is going to die next because if Billy says another word, he's going to kill him. So again, just the angry dude, like always. So they drive to Jones Beach State Park. Again, the song playing over this section is terrible. I'm not a 2000s rock fan, so I mean, this just sounded terrible to me. She says that Alex could be anywhere within like a mile to 2 mile radius. So just to drive forward and start looking for him. But then she passes two trees and immediately finds him, walks into him, which I thought was fucking hilarious. I was cracking up with this.
Yeah, I gave up trying to figure out the logistics. I'm just going with it. But that was pretty funny.
Yeah. So then Clear explains how her father was killed in a holdup, in a robbery. And then her mom remarried an asshole. She says somewhere her dad wasn't killed and her family is still together and their friends are still alive. Here, Alex says that he can't go home. Billy says, this is what Billy says that the fire caramelized the blood. I'm like, I fine, sure,
Mhm.
whatever. But Carter asks if Alex knows who's next. Alex doesn't say anything, and Carter takes it to mean that Carter is the next one to die. Alex says, "Do you think that it makes it easier to know?" No, it actually makes it harder to know. And that reminds me, there was a short story that I read, and I wish I could remember the name of it because it was so good. And it was about in this world, you could know they created this technology where you could know the exact time and death. I'm sorry, the time and date of your
Your
death
dad. Hmm.
if you wanted to.
Hmm.
And it was just like the, dealing with that information and the types of people who would want to know versus who wouldn't want to know.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know.
interesting.
Would you want to know if you could the exact date and time of your death?
Well, I'd have to give it a lot of thought. I don't know that I could say right this second, but I'll tell you, I would lean towards yes, because for honestly, for like practical reasons. So for example, if I was going to die 2 years from now, well then fuck all that retirement money I'm saving. I'm gonna go do some shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas alternatively, if I'm gonna live old, I'm like, "Fuck, I better save some money, or I better like I'm not gonna retire as early as I thought or whatever." But also, I think people would want time to like say their goodbyes and make sure everything's resolved and do everything you can to leave it in the best way possible. So for my planning nature, it would appeal to me to kind of have a sense. Having said all that, would I be so fucked up living the rest of my life knowing what's going to happen? Would I even be able to enjoy life? I don't know, man.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I suspect I'd want to know, but maybe that would be the wrong decision because you spend the rest of your life just wallowing over, the date of your death, I guess. I don't know.
And also, like, we know that like technology is tricky. Like, what if you get to the date of your death and you don't die and it was a mistake or something like that?
That's true.
Or
Oh, that would be an interesting twist. Yeah.
yeah, or it's just the date of your death, but you can be like in a coma for years. What if you get in a coma for
Mm,
10 years and then you die 10 years later or something like
I
that?
like it. I like
Or what
it.
if you're like you do die, but they bring you back? What if you die like what if you're supposed to die, quote unquote, in 2 days, in 2 years, whatever? The day comes you actually die, but they bring you back.
Dude,
But you were living the last 2 years like with
dude, you
reckless
should
abandon.
you should write your own take on this. There's a story right there, man.
Yeah, it was it's just like there's so much to think about. Yeah. I don't think I'd want to know. I don't think I'd want to know.
No,
But
I totally get that. Yeah.
I think in that story, I think other people can find out the date of your death.
Oh, so they're giving you like the side eye, like, oh, hey, how's it going? Like,
Yeah,
oh shit, am I dying tomorrow? Like,
exactly. Like
yeah, that,
if they're being nice to you, you're like, yeah, it's a great story. I'm gonna try to look it up and put it in the show notes and let you know
yeah, let
because
me know. Let
it's
me
a
know.
great story.
Yeah.
All right, so then Carter accuses Alex of getting off and having control over him by not telling him who's next. And Alex says it doesn't matter who's next because we're all on the same list. Carter says if that's the case, then why does it matter? May as well go out on my own free will, just like you said.
Yeah.
So then he starts driving crazy, blowing stop signs and stoplights. For Alex, he sees that the seatbelt was broken, then it wasn't, but this might be a vision. I think it's
Yeah.
clear later on that it's actual vision. So then Alex sees a reflection of a train, but the train isn't there. Carter stops the car on the train tracks as the gates come down, and we hear the train in the background. They're in a two-door car and like an older, like a 60s or 70s style car, and Carter doesn't let them out. And Billy can't move because he's kind of frozen and he's kind of taking his sweet time, but he finally gets out of the car, and so do Alex and Clear. And Carter is on the train tracks and he realizes it's not my time. So he tries to start the car, but it stalls. And the train gets closer and closer. Now, I just wanted to tell you that, when I was telling you earlier, I was thinking about all the times I could have died when I was younger.
Mhm.
So I grew up in Chicago, but we moved out when I was like 13 or 14 to the suburbs of Franklin Park, Illinois. And if people don't know, Franklin Park, I believe, has one of the highest concentrations of railroad tracks in the United States.
Hmm.
And so it was so annoying driving because you get stuck behind a train. And it's not just that there was train tracks, there was so many trains going back and forth, so you get stuck by trains all the time. I would Once the gates went down, I would go around the gates if I
Oh
could,
my God,
like a
dude.
freaking idiot. And then I would race the train. So if it's going parallel to where I'm trying to go, I would race the train to try to get to the next gate before it went down. And sometimes I would get there, but the train was already, the gates was already down, but I can go around it. I was just like 16, 17, 18 years old, like a fucking idiot.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy, dude.
It,
I don't.
dude, we just don't know like how dumb we are as teenagers, man. I'm telling you how many times I could have died, right? Because the thing is, I also drove an older car. Like I drove like an '87 Oldsmobile Cutlass
So
Supreme.
it
So
wasn't even reliable.
it wasn't even reliable. It could have stalled on
Yeah.
me. And I definitely would have stayed in that car. We're people stay in the car to try to get the car over the gate because you're like,
Mm.
no, I love this car. I would have stayed in the car.
Oh
I
my
would have
God.
waited till the last second. So
Dude,
yeah,
you would have needed the ghost track kids to come save you and push you over the railroad track.
exactly.
Yeah.
So all right. So then Carter sees. I said that part already. Or no, I don't. Carter sees the shadow in the rearview mirror of death. He tries to get out, but the door locks and he can't get his seatbelt open. So Alex runs to try to get him out and he pulls him out. The train's getting closer and closer. And at the last minute, Alex is able to pull him from the car. As the car hits the train, it explodes. And then a piece of shrapnel lands on the train tracks. And I thought immediately, okay, something's about to happen because we paused too long on that huge shrapnel there. But I thought the suspense here was pretty good.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like if there's a train bearing down on you and yay, trying to get him out, but then once he makes his realization that he wants to live and then he can't get out, yeah, that worked pretty well, I thought.
Yeah. So then Billy says, Billy is so surprised. He's like, "You're next, Carter. I'm staying away from you." He tells everybody, "Get away from him. He's next." And he's like, "You're dead. You're dead." And you ain't taking me with you. And then as this is happening, the train is continuing to go by them. And then suddenly a piece of chain that's hanging off the train hits the shrapnel and it goes flying off and slices Billy's head. And it's a fucking amazing shot. I absolutely loved it. What did you think?
No, I enjoyed it. Like you said, it was suspenseful and you knew something was coming. And so I think they delivered on what everybody was waiting for, which is a really kind of out of nowhere, shocking kind of death. And it looked great. I thought it looked really good.
Yeah. So then everybody's surprised. So Billy's dead. Alex says, "You should be next." He says, "I saved Carter. It went to the next person in line, which is Billy." So he says, "If I can see it, I can intervene. If I can intervene, I can change the design." And he's like he's gone here. So this is when Clear goes up and says, "Baby, you're losing it." Like, what, baby? When did we get to this baby crap? Like,
Yeah.
we're less than 24 hours into you guys talking again after this plane crash.
Yeah, I don't, it makes me wonder, like, when, how like they make movies and they chop it up and add stuff and delete stuff. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
maybe there was more that
In the
didn't make it
editing
in or
process.
something. I'm guessing because it doesn't seem like we got the full story. Maybe they decided to dump parts of it for time, or who knows.
Yeah. This feels very much like a 50s or 60s type of move, because in those movies, like, they need the romantic angle. That's like their formula. It's a movie. We need a romantic angle. We need a romantic interest and all that.
Mm,
And so they kind of just like stuff it in there. And that's what it feels like they're doing here. They're just like stuffing it in here, no matter if it makes sense or not.
sure. Yeah. No, you're right.
But the only thing that's stopping me from that is, like, she does say earlier on that she's drawn to him, but I think that's a kind of a weak,
Weak. Yeah.
weak, yeah. So later at Claire's family's cabin, Alex is kind of death proofing everything, kind of like you would child proof a home, making sure anything sharp has cover. It's covered. He's taped things to the wall so they can't fall over. And then he's eating tuna out of a can with gloves on, which I thought was pretty funny. He looks absolutely crazy. The tuna that was in there wasn't tuna. It was actually it was mushed up bananas,
Hmm.
which I thought was pretty good, because I don't like tuna and that looked disgusting. So death in the form of wind has arrived and it blows over a garbage can. I'm sorry, blows over a garbage bag, and the can of tuna that was in there rolls. It's like this elaborate thing. It rolls into like a fishing pole, which falls over and opens up a closet door. But Alex runs and closes the door before it can open, and the door is impaled by a sharp instrument. So Alex looks at the fish hook and sees that it's rusted and that he would have gotten tetanus possibly and died. And Alex yells at Death, basically, "You fuck, like, you tried to get me but you couldn't get me. Like, I beat you, maybe not forever, but I got this cabin rigged to beat you now." I like that this sense of impending doom, because you can't outrun death forever.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I appreciated the scene because this is something like you would think this is something somebody would do. If you really thought death was coming for you, you really probably would try to seclude yourself. When I was watching, I was thinking, man, like it would be in a completely separate story. It would be interesting for like someone to stumble across this guy when he's like 70 years old, never left the cabin, and he's sounds like a crazy person. No, no, if I leave here, I'm gonna die. You don't understand, you know.
Yeah, long
But
beard, he's a
yeah,
hermit.
long beard and all that. But yeah, no, I appreciated this scene because I like when, okay, what would a regular person do? Yeah, they would probably seclude themselves and try not to die, right?
Yeah,
Until their hand was forced.
yeah, and as we see later on, like, you're not even safe in nature when nothing's around,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
back at Claire's home, Agent Ween and Shrek are still watching her. Claire goes out to them and tells them that if I can go with you, I'll tell you where he is. They said they can't do that. Just tell us where he is and we'll bring him in safely. Later, Alex realizes that he had the wrong order, that he never moved, in the real
In
timeline.
real life, yeah.
Yeah. And so Claire was in front of him. So she's actually next. So he, this is a bit confusing, because it's like Death is like, "Oh yeah, you're right. You're not next. Claire's next, right?" Because Death was still trying to get him, even though Claire was supposed to be next. So I'm not
It sure
sure.
seemed that way because like the wind came in the cabin and all that. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he leaves the cabin and runs to her house, but the FBI has arrived at the cabin, and so he jumps in a canoe, and it's the first high speed canoe chase I've ever seen. But he basically canoes to the other side of the lake, whatever. They're in suit. They're in pursuit. So with Clear, the power line in front of her house falls off or whatever, and it's an electrocution hazard. And Clear lights a bunch of candles since the power's out. But her dog is trying to fight the power line, so she runs out to get him. And Death blows out her candle, basically, like the wind blows out her candle. So with Alex, he's running through the forest trying to get to Clear. And with Clear, another laundry hanger. This movie has nothing but laundry, like killer laundry hangers, almost impales Clear as it goes through the air, but it ends up impaling her swimming pool instead. Back with Alex, he tumbles down a hill, stopping himself right before he's impaled by a tree branch. Thought that was really cool. I really like that scene. That was really scary. If you remember that, he's falling down the hill, he has to stop himself, and there's a branch like
Yeah.
an inch from his face.
Yeah, you have no control rolling down like that. So yeah, that's a little frightening.
Yeah. So back with Clear, the pool breaks and the water floods the yard. The power line makes contact with the water, and she has to jump out of the way to avoid getting electrocuted. And she kind of scales her house. And luckily, her dog survives as well. He runs out of the scene, never to be seen again. Right?
That doesn't that always cause some anxiety? I mean, I have some nerve talking after the ghost treks, but like it always gives me some anxiety when I see these animals in these movies. To this day, I just can't. I don't like it.
Yeah, there's a website that I use sporadically when I remember called Does the Die Dog?
There's a
Does
doctor.
the
Yeah,
dog
yeah,
die.com? Yeah, and
yeah,
to see if you can if the dog is okay. And I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure the dog is okay. I mean, we never see
yeah,
it again.
yeah.
So then she sees Death's shadow in the water. A lightning strike, a lightning bolt strikes a tree, and the tree ends up falling on Alex, and it pins him down underneath a puddle of water, and he can't breathe. This causes the FBI to lose him, but since he was running towards the direction of Claire's house, they go that way. The power line kind of spazzes everywhere and almost gets Clear, but she manages to break into her house. But the electricity starts going haywire and causing all these electronics to blow up. And like you were saying, this is a clear escalation of Death. He's no
Sure.
longer being subtle about it at all. Right. So this wouldn't be seen as an accident, right? I'm sorry, this wouldn't be seen as suicide, right? It would be seen as an accident.
Right,
Right.
right.
Back with Alex, he manages to break free of the tree, and then he runs towards Clear's house. She makes her way into the car and she backs into the garage, but there's a piece of metal that prevents her from exiting completely. And then this can of turpentine falls onto the floor. The turpentine is spreading all around the car, and the cable just lands on top of her car. Alex arrives and says, "Don't touch anything. You're grounded by the tires." He says that, but then he grabs a metal shovel to hit the wire away, which isn't very, and it's not like he uses the wooden part of the
Use the
shovel.
metal part. Yeah, I never thought about that. Huh,
Yeah.
that's funny.
But then he manages to strike the wire away with the shovel, but the shovel hits a bottle of nitrous or something, some can that she uses for welding that apparently she welds. And that lodges itself under the car, and that's going to blow up very soon. Clear looks him in the eyes and he says that the car is going to explode. Um, he says, "I can only hold out for so long, and you know what to do." But she says, "No, don't do it." But he says, "I'll always be with you." Again, this closeness, this fake closeness, like, "Baby,
Yeah.
you were always meant to be. You were my one and only." It's like, what are you talking about? Where's this coming from? Very
Yeah, I don't
fishy.
even understand what that means. I'll always be with you. So what, in heaven? Like what does this even mean? Like I don't even, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
very strange. So the FBI pull up, and Alex grabs the wire, which gives Clear enough time to get out of the car before it explodes. And then Alex is pushed back by the explosion. Then she runs to his body and she says, "You can't do this to me. Come on, baby." Like, okay, sure. And then she's like, "He's not breathing." And then the FBI agents try to revive him. We see this white light. Then suddenly we're in this airplane tunnel, and it is 6 months later, and people are deplaning and they're speaking in French. We hear somebody say, "Well, we made it. We made it to Paris. I can't believe it. I can't believe we got on a plane again." And so it's Alex, Clear, and Carter. So apparently it's 6 months later, and whatever damage that Alex took from this power line is gone. I find that hard to believe.
Join the club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're in France and they're at a cafe drinking beer. And Alex says, "We finally completed a puzzle. It's just that there's something missing." But they all toast to all of their friends that can't be there. And then Carter says, "Alex is right. It did skip us. There was a design. We beat it. We won." And then she said, Claire says, "The only thing we want is a chance at a full life." And for some reason, Claire is now blonde. I'm not sure if you know, she's been brunette the whole movie and now she's blonde. 6 months. A lot of things can happen in 6 months.
I
It's the
think that happens.
passage of
Yeah.
time.
It's a fresh start.
Yeah. So then Alex says there's one thing he can't figure out. And he pulls out this path, this
A seating chart kind of
seating
thing. Yeah.
chart that he had, right? And they're both like, "Oh God, here we go again." So for the past 6 months, that's all he's been doing. The path of explosions determines the order of death that they have to beat. And he saved Carter, so it skipped him, and then it went next to Billy. Then it was clear, but he intervened and saved her, so it went to Alex. But in Alex's case, he was thrown by the power line, so nobody saved him, so it didn't really skip him. So that was kind of confusing to me as well. So he still should technically be next in line.
Next. Yes. They
Yeah.
didn't get that either.
So then Clear says, "How do we know that this isn't exactly what was meant to happen? That out of everyone on flight 180, you, me, and Carter were meant to live. Maybe that was the design all along." And then Carter, being the dick he is, says, "Or you still could be next." Then he says, "For all I know, it could circle back and get us." This is the line that people of the franchise kind of hold on to when it comes to the full franchise, and that you won't get that. But that line is something to think about for people who have seen the series.
Like eventually it's going to come back around anyway. Is that what they're trying to say? I guess even if you
Yeah.
cheat it, I guess that's what it
Yeah.
seems to be implying. Like I
Something
don't know.
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to
All
give
right.
it away because it's a big spoiler, but
Okay.
something like that. Yeah. So then they're still at the cafe. There's a busker that's playing a song, and I think it might be the John Denver song, but it's just the
Good.
tune.
Mm,
But I'm not 100% familiar with the song, so I could be wrong. And so he starts getting a premonition again, and Alex says he's going back to the hotel, and he tells Claire not to follow him. But then Claire gets a premonition and yells at Alex to be careful. As he does so, he ducks out of the way of a bus. But then this starts this kind of Rube Goldberg death machine thing happening, where the bus hits something that hits something else, that hits something else, that hits a sign that is falling, that's about to fall into Alex. But Carter manages to tackle Alex out of the way before it hits Alex.
mm.
He says, "I told you were next." And then Alex says, "It skipped me. So who's next?" Just as he says that, we see a sign coming from behind them. It's huge and it's swinging down, and it's just about to hit Carter. And then the scene fades to black, and that's the end of the movie. So we're going to get into our ratings soon, but two things. One, was Death like, "All right, I've tried to get this fucking Alex kid. I can't get him. So I'm going to wait until somebody saves his life, and then I'm going to get the next person." Like, was he just waiting? Was Death just waiting for, excuse me, was Death just waiting for Carter to save him, or what? Or was it just like inevitable? Like, had he made a pact or some sort of peace with Alex? I don't know what was happening.
So, I mean, it's interesting that Death would take like a 6 month hiatus.
Right.
Like he's been chasing them consistently this entire movie. And then because this guy gets electrocuted, he's like, what, let me give him a break for 6 months? Like that was kind of weird to me that it would take a break because you would think he'd be done with it by then. But let's say he comes back after 6 months, and if his theory is right, if I'm understanding it right, it's still Alex's turn, right? Or whose turn is it right now?
Um, right now, after Carter saved him, or before that happens.
Before that,
Before it happens, it is Alex's turn.
Alex's turn. Okay. And so they make a big point in the movie is the only way to get someone to skip the turn is if somebody intervenes and saves them, right? So now
Yes.
somebody has intervened. And so now I guess it goes back to who would be next now. Whoever, what's his name?
Carter.
Who's going to get hit, Carter, right? So I guess that's what they're saying. So I guess it makes some kind of logic, I guess. Although I did have one issue, maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Wasn't that sign like kind of swinging like a pendulum? Like it was
The,
clear it was going to come back around and hit.
yeah,
Like, wouldn't you move out of the way? Like, I don't know. Thought it was kind of
yeah.
weird.
Oh, was it the same sign? I thought it was a different sign. It could very well be the same
I
sign.
thought it was the same sign because it
Okay.
swings one way and they're just standing there like morons, like, shouldn't you move out of the way? And then it comes back as it
Yeah.
would given gravity, and then it
Yeah.
hits him. But I'd have to
Um,
see it again. That's what I thought happened.
okay. Well, so then we're going to rate the movie in a second here, but what did you think of Final Destination as a whole?
As a whole, I think it's what I thought it was when I originally skipped it,
Okay.
right? I do think that it was more interesting than I thought it was going to be. A, for the philosophical implications, right, of trying to outrun destiny if such a thing is possible, or if there even is destiny. I was surprised at how interested I was in the kill scenes because this is not something that typically interests me. Okay. But I think what they did a really good job with, like I mentioned earlier, was kind of slowly teasing it out and making them intricate and interesting ways. Um, so overall, I I enjoyed it more than I thought. Let's say that.
Yeah. I agree with you. This movie is vastly entertaining. I mean, it doesn't drag. I think like once it gets started, it kind of keeps going, keeps you entertained, keeps you like interested in it. The characters are not, they don't really have a lot of depth to them at all. And so when they die, you don't really, you're not like, oh my God, I can't believe that she died. You're more like, oh my God, I can't believe she died like that, you know?
Sure, sure,
And
yeah,
maybe they didn't want you to really get a connection because they want you more to be like interested in the next kills
sh
as opposed to like being
sure.
sad that your favorite character
Almost like
dies.
enjoying their deaths, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They're just disposable teens at this point, which is fine. That's the genre.
sure. Mhm.
That's the
That's what
genre.
they're going
So
for. Yeah.
yeah. But it was endlessly entertaining. I don't know where I got off saying the writing was good at the very beginning. I think you said correctly that the concept was good. The execution wasn't the best, but I don't think that the writing got in the way of the movie a lot. I feel a lot of the times that the writing was kind of iffy. We're like, whatever, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Next kill, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, I think the writing is good in the sense of what you said earlier about how it's entertaining. The pace is good. They knew how to keep up interest, which is a hard thing to do, right? That's not nothing. They knew
Yeah.
how to keep interest and keep things going in a consistent way where you never feel like, oh God, when is this thing going to be over? Like I never felt that way. Things kept coming at a good continual pace, and the writing is definitely good in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I enjoyed it. This is probably the fourth or fifth time I've seen it, and I'm never really bored, which is good. Good to say. Yeah. And for everything I mentioned before, like it's not like too cringy. It's not like racist stuff. Or the only thing it would be nice if there was representation of people of color and black people. But with that said, I think we can go into ratings now. So we do, you've been on the show before, so we know that we do out of 5 upside down crosses. So how many upside down crosses would you give Final Destination from 2000?
Okay, I'm gonna give it 3.5.
That's exactly where I'm at. I'm at 3.5 upside down crosses here as well. There's a lot wrong with it, but I think what's wrong with it is overshadowed by the positives.
Mhm.
And it's just a fun movie. I think Final Destination 2 is one of those rare exceptions where it might be better than the first.
That's interesting.
So if you're interested in doing Final Destination 2 at some point, I'd love to have you on to talk about that one.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I think that would be great. So we can see. And then I think I'd be done with the franchise after that. I don't think
After
I need
that,
to
yeah.
do any more after that. But I know I have a friend, Stanley, who says that like it gets a lot better and some of the later ones are better, but I think I'll be done after part two. But
Are they done with them now? Are there any more
I
coming
think there was something about a TV show. There might have been a part six. Like I don't. This isn't my franchise.
mm-mm.
Like I said, I just saw all of them for the first time like last year or something like that. So
Hmm,
if there is, I didn't follow it.
okay.
But yeah. So that's the rating. We both gave it 3.5 upside down crosses. So Celso and I are going to continue our conversation in the Sunday school sessions. We're going to be talking about his research on demons for his book, and also the movies that were kind of inspired, were some of an inspiration for the book. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/my horror confessional. So if you could please let everybody know once again how they could follow you, how they could support you, where they can buy the book, that sort of thing.
Sure. The Devil's Promise and the Ghost Tracks are available pretty much at any retailer. You can order them online. They'll all be there. I'm mainly on Twitter and Instagram. Just look me up, Celso Hurtado. I'll come right away. It's a unique name.
Yeah,
And that's it.
nice. Well, thank you so much, Celso, for coming on for the second time. This is so much fun. I always had a blast talking with you. I enjoy reading your books. You're a really talented writer. So thank you so much for the hard work you put into that. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Live spooky, die spooky.